Welcome to Your Life is in Your Hands with your host, Kenneth Lagerstrom. In this hour, you'll learn about something that many of us take for granted, our hands. Now, here's your host, Kenneth Lagerstrom.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Your Life is in Your Hands. I'm your host, Ken Lagerstrom, and each week we'll discuss a different topic relating to the hands. Today's subject is an introduction to palmistry and hand analysis. Does it work? How does it work? And how accurate is it really? We'll also be opening up the lines in a bit to answer your hand-related questions. You can email them to voiceamerica@humanhand.com or call them in to our toll-free line at 866-472-5794. Joining me today is Jennifer Hirsch, author and longtime professional chirologist. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Kenneth. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, thanks for being here. So how are you doing today?
I'm extremely well. It's nighttime here in South Africa.
Ah, yep, and still morning
where
over
I'm
here.
hailing from in Cape Town. Had a good day. Lots
Beautiful
of hand
area
reading. Yes.
Yeah, so how long have you been reading hands?
It's the 19th year now, Kenneth. I'd say I've had 19 inspired years of dreaming and sleeping and living hands. It's, from the very start, absolutely consumed me.
Really?
Yes, it's been a wonderful journey.
So how did you get into hand analysis in the first place?
Well, I've been a massage therapist for some 30 years. And what I found in those early years of massage therapy was that people used to talk a lot about their stuff, about their problems and difficulties they were experiencing in their lives. And there was a very strong counseling component to my work. And it slowly started dawning on me that as the trend moved from talking during a massage to working with energy during a massage and shutting up rather than talking, that it occurred to me that one needed to separate out the counseling component of my work from the touch therapy. And thus came my decision to study hand reading, because I felt this need to have eye contact with my clients, still the opportunity to touch them through the touching of the hands and transfer energy in that way, but to work more in depth with counseling, so to take palmistry to a different level, one could say.
Right. Okay, so, what's the difference then between palmistry and chirology?
Chirology is the term, yes, that's what we call, I'm trained in that specific type of palm reading or hand analysis. As you know, hand analysis has many different names, and we like the term chirology. It's an evolution of the old palmistry, one might say. Chirology has a more, let's say, psychological component to it. It definitely has a stronger metaphysical component. It's much more principled than the traditional Western palmistry, which was much more random. There was no real defined system. In fact, anybody who picked up, for example, a book by Cairo, a very popular palmist at the turn of the last century, would find that it's not terribly easy to learn those type of systems, because there wasn't a principled system really to it. It was each marking meant something, but there was no real understanding of why that marking meant what it supposedly meant.
So with chirology, you're getting the why of it.
Exactly. We have a system. It's based on the elements: earth, water, fire, air, and chi, or ether. And it gives a nice context, which is much more, in a sense, scientific, oddly enough.
Okay.
While also being metaphysical. So it's very ethical. It doesn't quite have the same fatalistic viewpoint that the old traditional palmists used.
Okay, right. So it's not so much predicting the future then?
No, we prefer to work qualitatively rather than chronologically. So we're working in a more holistic sense with the whole person, rather than what happened in their past and what's going to happen in their future.
Okay. So with all the metaphysics in there, does someone have to be psychic to read hands?
Well, my personal take on that is that we all have tremendous capacity for intuitive perception. Intuitive perception is cultivatable. It can be developed and does develop by default. When one studies the basics of hand analysis, any system of hand analysis, be it chirology, or perhaps one of the others that are available. There's the life print system, there's the psychodiagnostic chirology. There are a number of options out there in the world. But any of these systems, if one is steeped in the practical, systematic way, technique, the tool really, one and is working with other people, and eventually that intuitive capacity does develop whether you like it or not. So I would say you don't have to be psychic because you already are. Whether you trust and have confidence in your intuitive ability is another whole criteria. Of course, people do struggle with that. They feel they're not psychic enough.
Okay, so it sounds like you incorporate both then. You know, the intuitive side does really come out strongly for you.
In my particular case, yes. I over the years, I found that it's almost impossible to not be intuitive because we are calibrating one another all the time. I'd say whether we are aware of it or not. Even for people who don't look at hands, we're always picking up information from the people around us, and this is something we do consciously or unconsciously. So obviously you acquire a deepening sense of consciousness around your relationship or your interrelationship with your clients, and start to sense nuances of all sorts of information that is conveyed that has sometimes no direct bearing to the hands themselves. But then, of course, one can also take it a step further and look into the hands, look into the markings of the hands, and many readers, in fact, even perceive things in the markings of the hands. So there are different layers and different levels and different individual approaches to that question of do you need to be psychic and how psychic do you need to be, and what aspect of hand reading or hand analysis or chirology or palmistry, call it what you will, is linked to the psychic realm as opposed to the more scientific, practical system of hand reading that we utilize.
Right. So what it sounds like is that every reader basically has their own unique style or developed.
I would imagine so, yes. I mean, we are unique beings, yes, I'd agree. I'm sure you'd agree too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's quite a wide variety of skills, though. What skills does someone need to learn for reading hands?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd say, first of all, the willingness or the desire or the attraction, shall I say, to being in service, to caring enough about another human being to want to assist them in whichever way one possibly can, to have an acute observational orientation. So you need to be observant of the hands, the gestures, the shapes, the forms, the sizes, the textures, and so on. Clearly, you'd need to have a great interest in the topic and a belief in the validity of using the hands as a tool for counseling as a point of departure into the psyche of the person whose hands you're looking at.
And so then, of course, counseling skills as well come into play.
Yes, counseling skills are most important indeed. You don't have to be, in my humble opinion again, highly qualified as a therapist. I think there's a saying that a lot of our therapies are, let's say, 10% technique and 90% love. And I'm inclined to run with that when one is based in, let's say, basic code of conduct, professional standards such as confidentiality, such as, let's say, that we're not going to predict the future, that we're not going to be talking about ourselves during a session. There are a few basic criteria for good counseling, good listening skills, perhaps having a good referral list to refer your client to should they need some other specialist services, basically not having any ambiguity about your fee or ever being interrupted. I've got a few lists of certain criteria that are required to do for lay counseling, if one could use that term.
Right.
And my take on it, the way I like to encourage it, is anybody can read hands.
Okay. As long as they figure out what all those little markings and lines and things mean.
Yes, so they'd need some basic counseling skills, they'd need a service orientation, they'd need definitely, obviously, the scientific aspect or the system of hand reading, in other words, to be steeped in the know-how.
Right.
They need the technique, naturally. They need the commitment and the courage to perhaps open themselves intuitively and intellectually, perhaps for want of another word, to explore and to research and steep themselves in the history of hand reading and in the current state of the art, or craft, I prefer to call it.
So how long is it going to take somebody to be able to understand the meanings of the lines and markings on their hands? Is it going to be weeks or months or years?
What would your take be on that, Ken? I'm curious to know.
Put me on the spot, eh?
Yeah, I mean, you're also a hand-reading teacher.
Yes, I am.
Some of my students are very quick to learn and very confident, and they fly in and they just go for it. A couple of weeks of lessons and off they go. Others are all theory and no practice. They literally will go for years. They'll come to the study group. They'll read all the information available, but they don't have what it takes to actually step into the doing.
Right.
So this is, again, an individual, and I'm sure you'll agree, it's some people are more...
Yeah.
What would one use there? Is it a courage? Is it a confidence?
Right. I found it does tend to take at least a couple years before the person can really start understanding the hand.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't tend to agree with that. I mean, it's a lifelong study, isn't it? So is one ever done?
Yeah, I've been in
and
it.
And you refine as you go along.
Yes. Oh, and the study never ends.
No, never ever ends. Yes.
Especially not now with some of the new research coming out.
Yes, and all the different systems to choose from.
Yes. Yeah, there used to be just, a couple little systems, that was it. Pick A or B, and that's what you can study.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously biased in favor of the element system, which is the system I was trained in. I trained originally with the British Chirological Society.
Right.
They don't exist any longer.
Okay, but we're going to have to go to a quick break here.
Okay.
So we'll just take a short break, a few minutes there, and then we'll be back with more of Your Life is in Your Hands.